Good afternoon in New York and Eastern North America. Good morning, Middle and United States, Western part. Good evening in Ukraine, United Kingdom, Europe, and Armenia, in the Middle East and Africa. And thank you, whatever time of day or night, at all corners of the world. I am Dr. Yael Danieli, founder and executive director of the International Center for Multigenerational Legacies of Trauma, ICMGLT for short, which is in special consultative status with the United Nations. Thank you for joining today's ICMGLT webinar on Chernobyl at 40, lifelong and multi-generational legacies. This International Center for the Study, Prevention, and Treatment of Multi-Generational Legacies of Trauma, psychohistorical webinar is held in commemoration of the 40th anniversary of Ukraine's Chornobyl disaster of 26 April 1986, during the 2026 review conference of the parties to the Treaty on Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons that is taking place now, began 27 April and continues until the 22nd of May at United Nations headquarters in New York. Ukrainian and international multidisciplinary experts will share their own experiences, examine cumulative and intergenerational effects of this devastating event and its aftermath, and reflect on lessons they have learned. This timely discussion will explore parallels between the meaning of Chernobyl, among other multi-generational past tragedies, and current threats in Ukraine and around the world. As was stated by the Secretary General of the United Nations last Friday at the formal General Assembly commemorative event for Chernobyl, this is not only a Ukrainian tragedy, it's the world tragedy. And indeed, so many countries that are present in our audience today attest to that and to the importance of this webinar. For those of you who need direction, we do have Ukrainian English interpretation. And to get to that, please scroll down to either the little globe sign or to the three dots. Click. You'll find the word interpretation and choose the language that you prefer. Your moderator, I am a clinical psychologist, traumatologist, victimologist, and psychohistorian. Having developed the first program to help Nazi Holocaust survivors and their children in the 1970s, I have devoted much of my career to studying, treating, writing about, and preventing lifelong and multi-generational impacts of massive trauma worldwide, to ensuring victims' rights, the rights of future generations, and to reparative justice. I conceive of psychohistory as we live history in the now, not merely as a list of past dates, events, and numbers, but as it shapes our decisions and ways of being today. This webinar would not have happened without the generous dedication of ICMGLT's Ukraine Working Group and its chair, Dr. Irina Frankova, who is even helping us, giving us technical support today. As with all our Ukraine-related webinars, we are delighted to welcome again, with gratitude, our interpreters, now part of the Center's family, Gana Stemkovska and Natalia Zaitz. Today's first speaker is Boris Knurenko. Starting in 1974, Knurenko held several high-level leadership and engineering roles at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Notably, he served as deputy director of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, managing evacuations and participating in the subsequent 4-year liquidation efforts. After further leadership at the Scientific and Technical Center for Nuclear and Radiation Safety, he retired in 1995. He's a widower with 2 children, 5 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren. Today's second speaker on video is Alventina Maluka, senior engineer of the Physical and Chemical Department of the Sanitary and Hygiene Laboratory of the Republican Sanitary and Epidemiological Station of the Ukraine SSR, later renamed the Central Sanitary and Epidemiological Station Healthcare of Ukraine, transferred on May 3rd, 1986, to the Radiological Laboratory to train 30 advanced radiological laboratories thrice in Laboratory number 1 in June 1986 to the 30-kilometer Chornobyl zone, adapting submarine devices to determine the radiation level in the environment, objects, and food products, performing radiometric studies for the Ministry of Health and Civil Defense. Alventina earned a Presidium of the Supreme Soviet of the Ukrainian SSR certificate and 3rd-degree disability. Third is Denis Vishnevsky, a head of the scientific department at the Chernobyl Radiation Ecological Biosphere Reserve. Working in the Chernobyl zone of alienation since 2000, Denis' research has focused on the redistribution processes of radionuclides in terrestrial and aquatic ecosystem, as well as the organization of scientific studies within the alienation zone. His scientific areas of interest include zoology, teriology, radiobiology, and biodiversity. Today's fourth speaker is Olena Pareniuk, a Ukrainian radiobiologist and senior researcher at the Institute for Safety Problems of Nuclear Power Plants of the National Academy of Science of Ukraine, project coordinator for the Territory Prioritization Information Management at the Ministry of Economy of Ukraine, focusing on the impact of microorganisms on the availability and migration of radionuclides on the environment, and on revising nuclear safety standards for Russian armed attacks on Ukraine nuclear facilities. Olena is a member of the European Radiology Alliance, Nuclear and Radiological Emergency Response and Recovery Platform, and the Radiobiological Society of Ukraine. Olena is co-author of the book The Terrible, the Beautiful, and the ugly in Chernobyl, from the disaster to the laboratory. Last but not least, I probably ask him to speak second, Dr. Daniel Igor Branovan, an internationally recognized head and neck surgeon, professor, medical innovator, and healthcare leader for over 25 years. Dr. Daniel Igor Branovan completed his residency in otolaryngology, head and neck surgery at the renowned New York Eye and Ear Infirmary, where he later held leading positions, including director of the Division of Sinus Surgery, of the Thyroid Cancer Center, and of residency training. Dr. Branovan is the founder and chair of Project Chernobyl, a leading international humanitarian organization providing medical care to victims of the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. Within an hour after the conclusion of the webinar, you will receive the recording. We have 2 hours for this webinar, though we have been known for a most engaged audience who keeps us longer. Each of our presenters will speak for around 8 minutes, except for the first. Following an interchange among the panelists, I will open the floor to questions or brief comments from the virtual audience, which has quite a few surprises today, so be ready for additional contributions. I will then invite our panelists to conclude today's webinar with their last words. Please use the Q&A or chat function, and we will do our best to respond to as many questions and brief comments as we can. Feel free to direct your question to a particular panelist or to the full panel. I now have the honor of welcoming Boris Knurenko. Dear Boris, the screen is yours.
Добрый вечер.
Good evening. 40 years have passed since the disaster, yet I still see not the steaming reactor, but our beautiful city of Pripyat, the city of energy sector workers. April 26, a Saturday during the weekend, kids were at school, and there were even 2 weddings that evening. The city was unaware of the disaster, although there was an increased number of police in the city. Our home was 3 kilometers away from the reactor. Opposite to us, there was a 9-story building, and on the roof of that building, there was this beautiful slogan, "Peaceful atom to every home, destiny." On April 27th in the morning, police officers visited every house to announce evacuation, and buses were stationed near every entrance. 1,100 buses convoyed 49,000 residents of Pripyat. They said that we only leave for 3 days, but basically they left forever. Why the evacuation was on the 27th, not on the 26th? They were waiting for permission from Moscow. I participated in the elimination of the disaster from May the 1st. From May the 4th, I was appointed Deputy Director of Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant for evacuation and personnel placement. A busy period started for me and my colleagues. Most of our workers and their families were relocated to villages in the 3 nearest districts located beyond the 30-kilometer zone. Operational personnel were housed in summer camp facilities for children which were designed for 600 places, but we accommodated 1,200 people there. We traveled to work in buses that were lined with lead on the inside. In the administrative building, the office windows were covered with sheets of lead. I would like to emphasize that at that time, all issues were resolved very quickly and executed promptly. The decision was made by the governmental commission to construct a pier for 13 river boats on the Pripyat River for logistics for steamboats. By June 1986, these vessels were docked at the pier, and we placed there our operational staff. We worked for 15 days, 12 hours each day. Then there was another shift coming, and so it went on and on until September. At the same time, they started designing and building the Zeleny Mys, which is the village for the shift camp. It was 2 kilometers away from the pier. Leadership of the NPP and their deputies for those 8 months worked virtually without any days off. The first staff meeting started at 7 a.m. The last one ended at 10 p.m. In September, the shift camp was commissioned, and I had to accept the symbolic key from the construction workers. They did not postpone also resolving the issue for looking for apartments for our employees in the city of Kyiv. Kyiv allocated 7.5 thousand new apartments and also 10,000 places in dormitories as temporary housing. Chernihiv offered 500 new apartments, and we're still grateful for that. By the end of September 1986, the relocation of our workers' families began. And that was where me and my colleagues had to deal with. We also covered a number of other issues that we needed to address urgently. Work on liquidation of consequences of the accident continued relentlessly, day and night. The reactor was filled with sand, boron, lead, and other materials. 80 helicopters worked in that dangerous mission. Medical personnel worked tirelessly day and night dealing with the patients. Decontamination of the premises of the plant and city facilities and territories was underway. In October, the first reactor unit was put into operation. In November, the second one followed. Day and night work was continued, was ongoing to prepare the site for the sarcophagus and its construction. By November the 30th, same year, so on the 15th, we stopped it, and on the 30th of November, it was commissioned. 300,000 tons of concrete were used for the construction. The government of Ukraine decided to commemorate December the 14th each year as the day of the participant in liquidation of the Chernobyl disaster, and they keep celebrating it each year, commemorating it. Sometimes my acquaintances, upon finding out that I am a participant of Chernobyl liquidation, they ask me why the disaster occurred and who is to blame. In the first days following the disaster, a governmental commission was set up to address the reasons of the accident and also who dealt with liquidation issues. On July the 3rd, This commission met at the Politburo of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union took place with Gorbachev. They analyzed all the issues and the decision was made. The RBMK 1000 reactor possesses properties of runaway, which are due to errors in the physics and design of the reactor. That was stated by the president of the Academy of Sciences, Alexandrov, who initially participated in development designing of the reactor. So an unfinished reactor was handed over to the industry. This is what Gorbachev said. However, 17 days later, the newspaper Pravda on July the 20th published different information, that it was only the operational personnel and management of the plant who were to blame. So the investigation started, and in July 1987, the first trial was held. The verdict was that management and operational personnel of the plant were found guilty, and 6 individuals were detained and convicted. The criminal case against individuals who failed to take timely measures to improve the design of the RBMK 1000 reactor was separated as a separate case. And the investigation into the contribution of the to the accident by the chief designer, Nikitin, and the scientific supervisor was terminated in 1988 due to amnesty in connection with the 80th anniversary of the October Revolution. Thus, the second trial was not held, and it was only the staff of the plant who were deemed guilty. Further on, there were lots of various commissions. However, they were generally influenced by the already made decision, the decision that had been made. And only an independent commission led by Steinberg clarified all the points, and they analyzed every second, every minute of those events before the disaster. They identified and named the main culprits of the accident, and that's the chief designer and the research advisor. I mean, without those faults, our staff would not let the accident happen, would not have let. People ask me, could the operator have prevented the runaway of the reactor in the given situation? I mean, the uncontrolled increase in reactor power. Of course, but for this, he would have needed to know that in a certain part of the volume of the RBMK 1000 reactor, under certain conditions that were formed in Chernobyl NPP, formation of several critical masses is possible. And in this case, the neutron field of the reactor becomes imbalanced. And this data, our plants and other plants, and in the USSR, there were 15 RBMK 1000 units and 2 RBMK 1500 units. So they all came back with their comments, but they were all put in the drawer, and at least until 2006, no amendments were made to the design. And the technological regulations for our employees, for our operators, were the law, the binding. Regulations were binding, and the operator acted according to those regulations. Thus, the key reasons of the disaster are specifics of the nuclear and physical characteristics of the RBMK reactor type determined by the design of the active zone and low efficiency of the control and protection system. Automatic system SCADA, a control system, it gives signals to the operator 3 to 5 minutes after an event happens. So incorrect design of the SUZ rods, this causes the steam effect, but that's details, physical details. Another reason for the disaster was poor quality of the technological regulations. And also, design of Chernobyl NPP was entrusted to Hydra Project Institute, which is good. However, they specialized in design of hydroelectric power plants and hydraulic structures, not NPPs. As a result of the NPP disaster, people died and tens of thousands suffered. In the first days after the accident, 300 people were immediately hospitalized, of which 237 were diagnosed with radiation sickness of varying severity. 31 people died, 28 of them succumbed to acute radiation sickness. These were firefighters and plant workers. Our senior operator, Valery Khodenchuk, perished under the reactor debris during the explosion, so he died in flame. Vladimir Shishunok, another operator, he was severely burned. He didn't make it to the hospital. Currently, the book of memory includes 1,800 NPP workers who died of radiation-related diseases. Hundreds of our workers and others were ready to carry out the assignments knowing that there was a high level of radiation, and this is their great feat. The well-known biologist Yablokov rightly noted, testing of nuclear weapons and accidents inevitably generate radionuclides, krypton-85, carbon-14, and those that exist for thousands of years, such as plutonium-239, 240, and others, and they enter the ecosystem and inevitably cause additional mutations and other consequences for all living organisms. Even the IAEA, in one of their reviews, acknowledged that presence of tritium around nuclear power plants that operate under normal mode will soon become the main headache and issue. In recent years, data have emerged regarding true consequences of radiation exposure for individuals directly involved in the nuclear energy sector. This includes diseases of the nervous system and sensory organs, hypertensive diseases, musculoskeletal disorders, stomach ulcers, and duodenal ulcers, congenital deformities, cancer diseases, which are now 2 or 2.5 times higher than the average level for the country's population. Insufficient time has passed to ascertain the complete picture and scale of this new damaging factor related to the atomic industry. As for our family, I was diagnosed with cancer. I was treated in Israel. My wife also worked at the liquidation in 86, 88. She worked in the laboratory and she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Unfortunately, she passed away 8 years ago. In conclusion, I would like to recall the words by the famous Czech writer Julius Fučík. People, be vigilant. And I would like to add that nuclear energy does not forgive mistakes, be them large or small. To my fellow countrymen and colleagues, I would like to wish health, victory, and peace in Ukraine. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Boris. We are so honored to have you here as an authentic witness. And thank you for the information you shared with us. Because you concluded with medical findings, I would like to ask Dr. Branovan to speak next, because that is part of his reporting as well. Please, Dr. Branovan, the screen is yours. Please unmute.
Thank you, Dr. Daniele. It's a pleasure to take part in the webinar. I appreciate your assistance running the slideshow for us. We have a short time to discuss a number of things, so I've chosen to discuss two topics briefly, but I put quite a bit of information in the slides so Doctor, if you wish to share it with other members and participants, they're welcome to. There's more information there than we can have time to discuss. Next slide, please.
Wonderful, thank you. And please, everyone, feel free to put in the chat any relevant information. Follow Dr. Branovan's example. Thank you. Go ahead. Sorry.
It's a pleasure. Next slide, please. Briefly, I wanted to just introduce Project Chernobyl and go over some of the things that we worked on for about a dozen years that we were particularly active. Next slide, please. One of the key events that we worked on was creating a platform for governments and scientists of Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia to be able to exchange information, exchange scientific findings, and develop programs together. This was done through the United Nations, and we had annual conferences to discuss various projects, to coordinate research and findings. Next slide, please. In addition, we conducted screening of immigrants to the United States from Belarus and Ukraine as to the incidence of thyroid cancer. We found that relative to a standard population, the risk of thyroid cancer was elevated 42% in the adult population. Next slide, please. Finally, we introduced and popularized the use of minimally invasive radiofrequency ablation for treatment of thyroid cancers. This is an alternative of doing a large, complicated, and morbid surgery where a small probe is introduced through the skin and the cancer is vaporized. I'm pleased to say that this technique is now being used at a number of cancer centers around the world. Next slide, please. This is a graph of thyroid cancer among children. This is the red marks, the teenagers and adults in Belarus. And you see that in children, the thyroid cancer incidence peaks approximately 10 years after Chernobyl. The blue is the teenagers and adolescents, 15 years, and the black line are the adults. And our work was done approximately 30 years after Chernobyl, and we saw cancer rates still coming up. Next slide, please. For thyroid cancer in children, a number of factors were identified as key in increasing the risk of cancer. They were primarily radiation dose, age of exposure. The younger age, the greater the risk, and iodine deficiency, unfortunately, which was found in Belarus and Ukraine at that time. Next slide, please. We discovered that unlike general cases, cancers after Chernobyl presented two types of variants, both the classical papillary thyroid cancer, but also at least the third was a follicular variant, which is understood to be more aggressive. Next slide, please. Mm-hmm. Follow-up for approximately 20 to 25 years confirmed that radiation dose, age of exposure, and iodine deficiencies continued to be the key risk factors. We also demonstrated that nitrate exposure was also a significant risk. I'll speak of that briefly at the end. Next slide, please. It is understood now that aggressive surgery is required to treat the children appropriately who were exposed to radiation and developed thyroid cancer. They were indeed treated aggressively, where majority received total thyroidectomy, that is complete removal of the thyroid gland and removal of all the lymphatic tissue in the neck, bilateral neck dissection. It turned out that this was critical to disease-free survival in these patients. Fortunately, excellent medical care achieved outstanding results. 97% survival, which is completely outstanding for this population and this severe illness. Next slide, please. Follow-up demonstrated that radiogenic thyroid cancer is indeed much more aggressive at presentation. It tends to spread very rapidly, both along the lymphatic channels and along blood vessels. But aggressive and appropriate therapy is essential and very effective. Next slide, please. Finally, I want to bring up a tissue of exposure to nitrates among this population. This is a map of prevalence of thyroid cancer, and you see the yellow and the reds demonstrate increasing prevalence of cancer after Chernobyl in Belarus. Next slide, please. This is the slide of radioactive contamination, and in general, it follows a similar pattern, but there are areas of increased incidence which do not fall along the radioactive contamination zones. Next slide, please. This is a map of levels of nitrates in drinking water in Belarus, and indeed, those areas that are in red do show the increased incidence of thyroid cancer, even though radiation exposure was very low for those regions. Next slide, please. We postulated an argument as to what the process of development thyroid cancer might be as it relates to nitrate exposure. I won't go into the details. The slide is complex, and those who are interested can review it at their leisure. In conclusion, I want to say two things. One, the issue of nitrate exposure is critical, as in many countries, and as example in the United States, there is evidence that exposure to nitrates, which is consequence to use of pesticides in agricultural areas, can indeed increase the risk of thyroid cancer in these populations significantly. This subject is important, and it remains to be studied thoroughly. Second, and finally, we do not know enough about an intergenerational effect of radiation exposure. A number of well-developed and successful studies have looked at patients who were exposed, but not enough has been done to look at the next generation. And here a lot of work remains, and we hope to be part of this important process. Thank you very much, Dr. Danieli.
Thank you very much, Dr. Branovan. Thank you indeed for underscoring the importance of following up the second and even third generation. And let me add, not only purely medically, but also psychosocially. And we can talk more about it later and in the future. I look forward to that. Let me now ask Rabbi to please begin the video of Alventina Maluka, who was going to be our second speaker, also an authentic witness. Go ahead, Rabbi. Here she is. There is no, could we stop? Oh, good. Now we have do we have the translation, please, in English? There is no sound. Thank you.
It was the 5th of June. It was a Monday. And then on Friday, just before the end of the working day, I was summoned by the deputy chief medical officer. It was in the reception area. I asked the secretary, what is it about? And she said, it's the KGB. I went in and they told me, you need to go to those first pre mobile laboratories in the 30-kilometer zone. And by that time, my uncle, Koля, was already interned into the hospital because he was exposed to radiation in Pripyat. And he is my mother's brother. And my father also spent all his time in Chernobyl, and later he became disabled, and also it resulted in a lot of diseases, and his legs were amputated. And on the 19th of May, there were two buses sent to our school, and the children were evacuated to Donetsk Oblast, to Donetsk region. And our parents were not told that we have been put on a train and taken towards Crimea, but not all the way there. And we were turned back from Crimea to Donetsk, we were left there. And we spent nearly 4 days in the train without even understanding where we were being taken. And only after that, later, I found out that the children were put into the Piney camp, and the natural background radiation level there was almost the same as in Kiev. And when I entered the room, I was told that I was sent to Chernobyl as well. And I had this feeling of being doomed. So that all our family was affected. I was doomed to go there. So all the members of our family suffered because of that. Mom, and do you feel yourself a hero? Yeah, no, I don't. But you've done so much. But all of us were working hard. But what were you doing exactly? In this mobile laboratory, we were traveling all over the villages in the 30-kilometer zone, and we were taking the samples and the specimen. And it was June, and the currants and black and red currants were ripening, and we were picking those berries, and we were inspecting them. And the soldiers were leading our way, and they were purifying the water in the wells, and we took the samples of this water before purification and after it, and they purified it with the sand and some other chemicals. And well, people were evacuated from those villages. Those villages were absolutely unmanned, they were empty. And the goal of our work to find out whether it will be possible to bring back the people into this 30-kilometer zone from which they were evacuated. And we have visited all those villages, and there were only 2 among them, and they were deep in the forest, were not contaminated with the radiation, with the radionuclides. And all the rest were contaminated. Even the water from the wells after it has been purified, but we were taking the samples before purification, and then the soldiers purified them, and we came next round of research, and then we again took the specimen and the samples from this water, and it was still absolutely contaminated. So no purification cabinet. Mom, and were you protected? How were you protected? Well, we were not protected at all. But did they offer something to do so that you can protect yourself? Because you were not a specialist in radiation. It was new to you. You were thrown there like just innocent children. We were given just white gowns and and nothing else. Well, for you to understand, my mom at present is using the wheelchair. And after Chernobyl disaster, my father also moved in the wheelchair. And my father's legs were amputated until the end of his life. He was unfortunately traumatized and he spent the rest of his life in the wheelchair. Mom, would you like, is there something you would like to tell us? What really impacted you, and what do you remember about that? I remember the optimism. I have never seen the optimism of this kind, and I have never seen that kind of support we gave each other during that period of time. There were so many jokes were told. So you were trying to save each other, and you were supporting each other. Yes, that's true. That's true. And maybe this helped to survive, Mom. What do you think about it? Oh, yes, it helped a lot, Nina. If I'm saying that when I was very pessimistic when I was told that I will have to go to Chernobyl 30-kilometer zone, I was sent there. And then I changed my attitude because I saw the young boys who were 18, 20 years old that were working there. Oh, and I saw how the general was crying because he understood where he was sending those children, and he could not do anything about it. Gala and myself were invited to a dinner to the military servicemen. And he was telling, this general was telling us, I cannot really recover. I knew today that I was sending these young boys to meet their deaths. Their task was, and there was no real protection. And they were walking in a goose file up to the roof of the reactor, which has exploded. And there at the roof, they had to pick up the lumps of the graphite, which was uh, falling on the roof after the explosion. And they were taking those lumps of graphite and they were throwing those radioactive pieces down into special vessels. And they had to carry them. And definitely they were getting high doses of irradiation. And these were the soldiers from the chemical units. Were they prepared? Were they well prepared and trained? Nina, I don't know. I don't know whether they were because we were not prepared for that. And actually, we were not prepared when we were sent there. Most probably, they were not prepared as well. But you were not working in the radiological laboratory. No, no. Well, but nevertheless, we were sent there. But do you think you coped, Mom? Oh, for 1 month, Nina, I was doing all the radiological tests and I was preparing all these instruments and tools. And I was learning while working, and I learned how to process all the data to get correct results and relevant results. And I even was trying to prove the military servicemen that all my results are properly calculated, and they are absolutely relevant. And I was computing some errors which might have appear. But this was about the tests which demonstrated that the allowed norms were higher. It was the first village of the 30-kilometer zone. And then by the evening, we came close to that village, and it was so quiet there. No sounds, absolutely no sounds. And the dogs are not barking. And there is a small three-wheeled bicycle lying just in front of the gate to the estate, to the and then people were evacuated. People left everything behind because they were not able to pick up their things with them. And this was so awful. It was so scary. And then we went to the next village. And at the outskirts of the village, there was a very small hut. There were no luxurious buildings. And two old ladies are emerging from that old hut, but everybody was evacuated from there. But these were two elderly women, and they were twins. And they looked like each other, absolutely. And they were bare feet. When they saw it, we were trying to ask them, please put some shoes on, because there are a lot of radionuclides, because we were actually measuring the level of radiation. You cannot walk bare feet. But they were looking at us calmly and say, we don't care. And, this was heartbreaking. It was very difficult to watch that. Thank you, Mom. I have recorded everything you've said. Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing the video with us. Having listened to it, this is the shorter version. Having listened to this shorter version, I would suggest that maybe that Natalia and Ghana, please maybe interpret the long version so we have it in our library in full, also in English. That would be very important. I'm sure, Boris, that it was particularly touching for you to listen, since you shared the same images, the same air, the same water, the same ground. And of course, in the field of trauma, we know that not only the victims are affected, but also the helpers, the first responders, the doctors, the researchers, both directly because they share the trauma, as Boris and the video have shown, but also indirectly as Dr. Branovan does his studies. We are all touched, affected, moved. It's not just collecting data removed from life. So that's why I actually invited Boris to have a full interview with us too, and even his daughter. So we have the full human picture. Let's now move to the next generation. We actually have 3 generations here on this panel. And Dennis, we are most eager to hear your contribution. And then, of course, Elena. Dennis, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. And I would like to thank you for these speakers, because it was very interesting for me to listen to them, especially the last speaker, because I felt like a colleague of hers, because I was working in the area of controlling the radiation levels in the environment.
I would like to say that Chernobyl disaster is something that in English there is this spot-on phrase, turning point. This was a turning point. It impacted all the generations that were close by or in the same information field anyway. I believe, and before I proceed sharing my experience, I wanted to share and say that for us to understand the behavior or the experience of Chernobyl disaster, we could refer to another traumatic event, another turning point, that's the Second World War, because it also affected the same territory that was affected by the disaster. I talked to those people and they say that the greatest fear for them or for their parents was the fear of the war, of the danger, evacuation, losing their homes, livelihood, their place, their position in their life, that the generation before that, 40 years before Chernobyl disaster, had already experienced. I mean, this resonates very well. Now, speaking about my experience, when I came to work there, this perception of catastrophe among the professional community was non-existent. I mean, that was already a professional community that were quite professional, working in the exclusion zone. Though every year on the 26th of April, we had this ritual that in the evening, the day before, so when we were in Chernobyl, we would have a meeting with some snacks in our department, and it happened everywhere as well. So there we so senior colleagues who participated in the liquidation process, they shared how they found out about the disaster, how they were engaged in liquidation process. So even though that period was quite distanced from us, but it was still with us. But I didn't expect that another catastrophe will affect my generation, the war. It didn't come all of a sudden because the hybrid warfare started back in 2014, and throughout 2021, this way or another, we could feel the shadow of the war, something looming, something coming, especially in several last weeks before the full-scale invasion. No one disguised that. Me and Olena, we are co-authors of one of collected works, and I shared my experience at the beginning of the war in the exclusion zone. It is in English. I will send you. It is available in PDF format. So I did not meet the war in the exclusion zone. I was not there. I was in Kiev. And at a certain point, I had the impression that I was not in a trap, but in quite an unstable environment, because it was not clear how the attack on Kiev was going to develop. I could see in the media, in the news, how Russian troops entered the NPP. I called my acquaintances. They told me what was happening in Chernobyl. And after the occupation, we went back to the exclusion zone, and we were not in despair or feeling of loss. We estimated the damage, what was destroyed. They stole a lot of stuff, but the general trend was that we were ready to work to recover. Okay, we had that situation. We understand that now this is not just about managing the NPP and radioactive waste. That's also about defending our country and demilitarization of the exclusion zone. So we accepted those rules of the game. For about 6 months, we tried to understand what we can do, what we cannot, how to communicate with the military, how to make sure that we do not create problems for each other. We tried to help the Ukrainian army, especially sharing our expertise. We could feel the duty. We wanted to at least contribute in this way as civilians to defend our country. And the second thing, well, I'm not trying to be eloquent, but we felt that we were citizens and the state pays money to us. And of course, we need to work hard. And during 12 months, after 12 months, we managed to recover our processes. So for me, that's about resilience, even though I don't know what the effects will be further on. I noticed among my colleagues that 2 or 3 years in the situation of a war may affect their behavior. I mean, some disruptions in their emotional state, that's what I observed from time to time. On the other hand, I saw incredible examples of resilience, adaptation to the situation. For example, I came just recently, less than a month ago. That was quite an significant drone attack on Ukraine, and drones were flying over the exclusion zone. And when a Shahid drone falls down, it falls into the territory of the reserve, and usually it results in wildfire. Our rangers go there to extinguish that, but then there is another wave of drones. And again, air defense works, and they say, like, this gives you a lot of adrenaline. On the one hand, you extinguish the fire, but you understand that it's very dangerous. But I didn't see any panic or whatever. Over the 4 years of the war, there have not been any cases where people would say, no, I will not go there because it is too dangerous, we're too close to the border, or missiles and drones come. No, everybody adapted to those rules of the game. That's about resilience, right? But what the long-term consequences are going to be, I have no clue. What will be the consequences for our kids, for their children, for those people who now show this resilience? What will children see in their behavior? But just to sum up, let me say that all functions of the exclusion zone, they are fully functional. We are managing the NPP despite the attack on the facility, the new safe confinement. Even though there are military troops in the NPP, all the functions, radioactive waste management, managing the reserve, all of this is working seamlessly. Maybe that's also a result of a response to the challenge that we're seeing now, but we will see long-term consequences later. I believe that's what I wanted to share with you, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Dennis, thank you for again pointing out the urgent need to study succeeding generations, all dimensions, both the physiological, the biological, and of course the psychosocial. And we do have the assessment tool. So I'm calling on you to adapt it to the Ukraine situation and to the Chernobyl legacy. And we work together to study those. So thank you very much. Last but not least, I hope you're not freezing there, Olena. You're clearly outdoors. Please join us.
And the opportunity to listen to the wonderful lecturers. I will be probably representing a little bit of view on the future, because before the war, I was working in Chernobyl, I was working in Fukushima. I've learned quite a lot about the management of radioactive substances. But right now, I am among the decision makers about the mine action strategy in Ukraine. I'm working in the Ministry of Economy, and very ironically, my experience is much needed as we are estimating that we are going to have a huge scar on the territory of Ukraine. It will be the same exclusion zone, but it won't be caused, hopefully, by radionuclide contamination. It will be caused by military contamination. So really, ironically, my experience was really necessary for that. Yeah. I must emphasize that Chernobyl is not a unique disaster. Yes, we must take a look on this sequence of the disasters as basically a sequence. As a humanity, we are learning something from each and every disaster, including the war, including all of the other types of some disasters. That is why we shouldn't stuck on the idea of the aftermath, or we shouldn't stuck on the idea of learning the lessons, but we should face the consequences, we should recognize the consequences, and we should learn how to live with the consequences. Because like my favorite quote is from a comedian, Carlin, who said that nature is fine, humanity is not. And so it is our problem to live on the contaminated territory that we contaminated, and it is our problem to take care of our heritage and of our health and our psychological well-being. So right now, as Denise probably is mentioning, we have quite situation in Chernobyl exclusion zone. So we do have a lot of different facilities and a lot of different situations ongoing right now. So we have the military activity, as it is a trans-border territory. So no one cares whether it is biosphere reserve or not. No one cares whether it is contaminated by radionuclides or not. There are a lot of military activity over there. So we cannot stop doing some military training and radiation response training on that territory. Chernobyl faced a number of crises. The first one was, of course, the Chernobyl accident in 1986, and then it was military occupation. And Chernobyl territory was the first radiation or nuclear facility that was occupied by enemy armed forces. That is why Chernobyl is probably the best place to learn and to educate people how to respond in case of the military aggression on the territory of the nuclear facility. There is a huge need of rethinking about the heritage of Chernobyl, and we also must remember that it is not only technological accident, it is not only a technical accident, but also Chernobyl territory is an ancient territory. It has a huge history. That is why we are suggesting to create the Center for Chernobyl Studies, which will be a humanitarian center, to be able to study not only the Chernobyl disaster, but also the history of that territory. Of course, it will be impossible to continue living and continue doing something on the territory of Chernobyl exclusion zone without the science. So we are suggesting to create Chernobyl Science Hub on that territory that will be focusing on studying, of course, nuclear and radiological consequences of the accident, but not only. There is also a huge potential of studying space science, studying biological resilience, studying robotics, drone technology, and so on, because basically the inner zone is surrounded by Chernobyl Biosphere Reserve, which is a buffer territory. So basically, in the inner 10-kilometer zone of Chernobyl, you can do a lot of different experiments without the risk of hurting population, because there is no population in Chernobyl exclusion zone. So, of course, it is very important for us to restore the wildlife, and Chernobyl Biosphere Reserve is making a really good job on it. And again, as the first reactor is destroyed and there is a lot of corium, like uranium containing lava still inside the sarcophagus. So about 96% of all of the fuel that was in the first reactor is still under the new safe confinement. So we have to take care of it. And also the 10-kilometer zone of Chernobyl exclusion zone is used as a center for radioactive waste management for 15 units of nuclear power plants in Ukraine. Of course, Chernobyl should be the center of radioactive waste management. So let me finish this wonderful webinar and this wonderful talk by the proposal to not only think about the past, but also start thinking about future, about the opportunities that were created by this terrible accident, and about the lessons that we can learn and also implement in our ongoing activity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to I'm sure you know, just to add, I'm sure you know of the United Nations Independent Panel on the Effects of Nuclear War. It's on the, actually, I feel quite optimistic, despite the horrible situation we live in today, in the sense that many bodies, international bodies, are working together to try to share data, discuss and discuss policy implications, which are so important. It's a major question, actually, for this panel as well. So so thank you, Olena. I'm sure there'll be more questions to you. And I certainly hope we continue to work together, because we are working also with the UN Independent Panel here in New York. So this would be quite a good, so my call for the psychosocial studies, of course, is to you too, because that's my call there too. So thank you. Our next phase of the webinar, normally, as I stated before, was, a dialogue among the participants. So please, if you have any question to each other or any comment on each other's presentation before we open the floor to a surprise and to questions from the audience. Would you like to share anything with each other right now? Anybody?
Dr. Danieli, I was just going to add that I think you've created a wonderful format. It's nice to see the breadth of lectures. It's both the social, the reality of going through this, and the scientific. So thank you for creating this wonderful, diverse panel.
Thank you. I hope we continue that way. We are multidisciplinary and multidimensional and integrative. So if you saw that, I am profoundly glad. And if you would, please, Robbie, put in the chat our prior Chernobyl webinars, so you can go to the website and learn from our prior webinars as well, and see. Boris, would you like to share maybe some of your reactions to the video?
Well, it was absolutely interesting for me, definitely. Because I haven't visited this station for 25 years, maybe. So I was carried away by listening to everything which was told here, also by Denise and his colleague, and they were making great presentations. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, so I guess with that, since I promised you a surprise, and we have one. Lena, would you please join us, introduce yourself and a way that Ukraine have observed the anniversary last week. This is Lena Kuch. She is, go ahead, introduce yourself, dear, and introduce the, go ahead.
Hello to everyone. My name is Lina Kush. I am the first secretary of the National Union of Journalists of Ukraine. And thank you for inviting me to this such an important and interesting webinar. In 2022, the Chernobyl zone came under Russian occupation, and once again, the threat of a nuclear disaster loomed. And we work as a largest journalist organization in Ukraine. We work with many local and hyper-local media outlets, and I want to share the story of the media from Ivankiv district, where the Chernobyl nuclear power plant is located. During the Russian occupation of the district in 2022, the editor-in-chief couldn't contribute, couldn't continue publishing the newspaper, but he managed and did what he could. He preserved the newspaper archived and hide them in the safe place. It is thanks to journalists, to many journalists, that we are able to learn the truth about the Chernobyl disasters. And recently, our union hosted in our office in Kyiv a photo exhibition of archival images dedicated to the fourth anniversary. And at the opening, we brought together journalists who were working at the time and covering the cleanup efforts. The Chernobyl disaster is my personal history, my personal story as well. I was a student 40 years ago, and I studied at Kyiv University. And I remember Kyiv in those times very well, how they sprayed the chestnut trees from large water tanks to wash away the dust, and how they hosed down the streets, buses, trams, and so on. Iodine disappeared from pharmacies because people had heard their need to take it orally, and communists forced students, us as students, and our professors to attend the May Day, the first May Day demonstration in center of Kyiv. But our dean of our faculty ordered us not to go anywhere and stay in the campus. So no one knew then what the possible consequences might be. And now our discussion raised so many topics and so many memories. I believe it's highly important for young generation, for young Ukrainian to know about this those days 40 years ago. Now you can see the archive photos from our exhibition. You see the famous Ukrainian famous Ukrainian poet Alina Kostenko during those time, and other many journalists, writers. They visited this zone, yeah, and they took pictures. They took pictures, and these pictures were presented not only in Kiev in our office. They were presented as well in European countries. I believe it was interesting to listen to discussion during opening the photo exhibition, because we discussed why today's younger generation rarely talks about one of the largest tragedies in Ukrainian history. It's about the generation gap, maybe. Unfortunately, over the past 40 years, Ukraine has many tragedies and is currently experiencing a full-scale war. So for the younger generation, maybe their own experiences feel more immediate, feel more important than those of their parents. And it's a question how we can find the common things between generations, how we can unite, you can feel united, taking into account different experiences and different between a different generation. And I believe that in those dialogues we can find the common things between younger Ukrainians and between the elder generation of Ukrainians. There are unique pictures made by brave Ukrainian journalists in those times. Thank you so much, dear Yael and dear colleagues, for organizing such an important and unique event. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, dear Lena. And Dr. Branovan, you would note that in our working group, we have journalists as well, since Lena is part. So we truly are multi-professional, multidisciplinary. Thank you, Lena. This was a really wonderful idea to add the current way in Ukraine of showing the next generation and keeping the legacy alive. And this is actually an invitation, Dennis, Dr. Branov and Boris, to be part of our Ukraine working group in the future. Absolutely. And I have an apology from Olena. She doesn't want to traumatize her son to do intergenerational trauma, and he wants to go to sleep. So she had to leave. But she promised that Dennis would be able to answer any questions that directly referred to your work. Just like any other trauma in this world, we have we have the problem of politicization. And indeed, we see it here too. So let me, but let me first attend to Laurie Johnston. When did the USSR learn that there were defects in the reactor design? Was this design used elsewhere? Was the international coordination of research and testing through the IAEA or other organization that did or should have flagged the flaws in the reactor's designs? Please, Boris, I think you're the right person to answer, but also anyone else as well. Go ahead, Boris.
In those days, academician Legasov, a great scientist, Legasov, and he participated in the dealing with the consequences of the accident. Unfortunately, he committed suicide. And he was speaking at the meeting of the International Energy for Atomic Energy. And he was delivering a speech on the reasons of the accident in the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. But he well made a wrong statement there. But actually, he lied, to be frank. In those days, in the Soviet Union, there were 15 nuclear power units of RBMK 1000. And one in Ignalina in Lithuania, there was RBMK 1500. And he could not tell about these deficiencies because each unit at a certain conditions which were created at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant could explode as well. So the International Agency for Atomic Energy might not be aware of these deficiencies. And after the accident, 100 changes have been made in these units. For example, the structure of the rods for safety have been changed, and the lower part of this rod is graphite, and we know that graphite absorbs 20 times less of the nitrons than water. And thus, the physical phenomena exist when the reactor could be, especially when the capacity was lowered at lower than 500 megawatts. And it seems that 3 reactors rematch. In the upper zone, there is vapor and steam, and the water is being heated to 280 degrees, and 80% of it is steam and too much water, and the capacity of the reactor increases, and the middle part is working properly, but at the lower part of the reactor, the rods of the lower part of the management of protection are pushing out the water. And again, and the nitrogen flow is increasing and the capacity is increasing, and thus the field becomes distorted. And the operator has 4,000 data units and describing the situation. But the system of the defense Scala was obsolete by that time, and it provided data 5 minutes later than the accident occurred. And Legasov was not able to report about all these issues at the meeting of the International Agency for Atomic Energy because the Soviet Union was boasting that they had the most advanced scientific solutions. So this was the situation.
I see that
And
Dennis
I would like
wants
to add, if I may.
Go ahead, Dennis.
Yes, I was not working at the technical area, well, distinctly as but I was working in environmental sector. But I have an experience of 25 years and I have some understanding. Last week, within the framework of the events which have been dedicated to the anniversary, 40 years anniversary of the accident, in Kiev, we had a presentation of a book by Steinberg with a very good title. It was named the journey to April. That is the journey to the accident. Everything what Boris said is very important, but how it have happened. So Steinberg describes the situation in a lot of detail. I hope that it will be translated into English because it's very important. And this book explains very important issues which are actually which was describing all the physics and engineering aspects of this accident. And the and maybe a lot of space programs were disbalanced because they maybe were too early implemented for the mankind. And maybe this could be said the same as nuclear energy. And this is about the psychology. And these are the actually the relations between the machine and the data. And Steinberg said that the reactor was too complex and the relevant computers should have been used for that. The system of management were not compliant with the possibilities of the operator. So it was necessary to improve the management block, which was developed with the computers. And and this is my opinion and this is my view. But this book explains a lot of things in what about what Boris said. Like the feeling of guilt, the feeling of the unfair trial. And I was not part of this community, but I was impressed that the director of Bryukhanov was working at the station after this trial happened. And actually, he was imprisoned for 5 years and he came back to work in the station. So this book explains a lot. I have not been talking to these people, but I have a feeling that we should restore some sort of fairness, not about for these people, but also we have to be fair to their descendants and also to the community of people who are working in this reactor. We have to answer the question whether they were not guilty or not, but they were not guilty. So this book by Steinberg gives a very, very good answers to all these questions. And it really deserves a right to be read.
After the director was convicted, he worked in Kyivэнерgo. He didn't work at the NPP. He was dealing with international relations. He didn't go back to NPP. Oh, I'm sorry, because I mean, that's the information that I had, but I know that for sure. Maybe journalists confused the facts. But anyway, what impressed me, just several months before the war started, he passed, and I saw the broadcast of the burial ceremony. I saw the feedback from employees of the NPP, and basically they saw him. He was not ostracized. He was one of that community. I was his deputy for 7 years. I know the guy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you, and thank you for being here to protect them, those who are not here anymore, indeed. And there is a related question that, as moderator, I have to ask. Do you recognize guilty Professor Alexandrov and Professor Delayal in construction failure of reactor RBMK, particularly in disadvantage of control rods? And let me keep going, Boris, also, because Petra Seilbert from Vienna is greeting us and wants us to remember also Luli Andreev. Please, Boris, I believe you are the one to take it on. The question is from His Excellency Dr. Hab Ilya Kolosov. And his question, do you feel exploitation of Zaporizhia NPPP safe after 4 years of cold stop or reactors and Russian capture? Will we have to close such NPPP to avoid neo-Chernobyl in contemporary world? And there is a separate question to Dr. Branovan, so I will wait with that. Boris, would you like to respond, please?
Oh, seizing any NPP explosions next to those facilities, reactors, that's nonsense. That's obviously about the nuclear war, basically. However, in Zaporizhia NPP, there are different kind of reactors. There's water hydrogen, a different type of reactors. They are more resilient. Nevertheless, if a shell hits a reactor, obviously that will cause maybe not that scale of a disaster, or who knows if explosion starts. I mean, obviously that's horrible.
Thank you, Boris. Dr. Branovan, there is a question. I will get back to you, Dennis, okay? Let me just ask the question from the same person who asked the previous question. From Dr. Branovan, is there a connection between Chernobyl disaster and Down's disease? He probably means Down syndrome.
Not that I'm aware of. There's been basically the studies that have been done look at DNA damage that occurs as a result of radiation exposure, obviously radioactive iodine predominantly, but we also looked at the consequences of nitrates, that those are genetic damages. But no, I'm not aware of correlation with Down syndrome.
Thank you. Dennis, you wanted to add anything to what Boris
Yes,
said?
I would like to. Thank you. Because first, I also have some information. I remember the time when the NPP in Zaporizhia was seized. I was a member of an expert group, and I promised that I will compensate for the expert capacity. So what's going on there? This is not even about that it may be affected by an explosive. It is prohibited to interfere in any way into NPP operation, even logistically, I mean, delivery of staff or of materials. I remember how they delivered staff people to Chernobyl NPP in some weird way. They used fishermen's boats because all the bridges were exploded, destroyed. And imagine that Zaporizhia NPP, it is sort of neutral zone. Okay, Russian troops recede, but the staff who work with the reactor, they experience huge psychological pressure. Now the situation is even worse, much worse. The information that we receive from Ukrainian intelligence proves that there are people who are kidnapped, people who went missing. There is very aggressive interference. It's same thing as you enter the control to the operation room where a surgeon operates, and suddenly someone enters and starts interfering into what the doctors are doing. I mean, almost the same thing. You should not wait even for a ballistic missile hit the reactor. That's already a problem. And we see another problem, and it's not a secret. The territory of the NPP is used as a military base for Russian troops. The concentration of explosive and dangerous stuff there is high, and of course, that's absolutely horrible. This is what must never happen. That's it from me.
Thank you. Thank you for the matter-of-fact answer indeed. We do have an audience from 4 continents, all extremely involved and interested. And I would like to acknowledge Augustine Shiminama Mana from Rwanda, who reminds us, not that we need a reminder, but thank you, Augustine, who reminds us that in Rwanda, trauma is found among 27 to 35% of survivors of genocide. Any cooperation about therapies, research, training are welcome, absolutely. And he reminds us that we are actually now in the 100 days of the commemorative 100 days of the genocide in Rwanda. And Augustine, please be in touch with me, since we are planning a webinar or two about the 100 days, as we do every year. Thank you. I promised before that I also would like to make sure that there's also from Jeremy, one of our youth division. Thank you, Yael, and all panelists, for your insightful contributions to this discussion. I write this question as an 18-year-old from New Jersey, United States, someone from a younger generation who is about to embark on my next educational journey in college. My question is for everyone, from anyone. Are you optimistic enough to believe one day societies will remove nuclear weapons from its arsenal of conflict and permanently switch to dialogue and compromise? When I personally think about this question, I can't help but be optimistic that my generation might be able to help facilitate this change. I'm curious to hear other perspectives. Thank you very much. Please, everyone, attempt to answer Jeremy. Let's start from the last back. Dennis, what about you? What do you think?
Okay, thank you. Now, thank you for that question. Above all, it's nice to hear it. Now I am in my office and I have this bookshelf. One of my favorite books is Steven Pinker, Best of Us, The Best in Us. I do hope that this trend will be preserved despite the dramatic events in my own country. So most likely, again, this is about hopes, because is there any other way? Because look where we are. However, I do hope that we will keep this trend towards improving the status of the world. I mean, that we will focus on positive aspects. I mean, I do not hope that we will do not hope for an utopia or some perfect state. But even though we go through a difficult trial, I do hope that world will be better.
Dr. Granovan? Do you have a hope for, do you have an optimistic word for Germany? It is there, it is, yes, go ahead.
Recent history is an indication of future trends. There is a tendency toward greater proliferation of nuclear weapons, and that makes it less likely that the big countries will choose to surrender theirs. So I wish to be optimistic, but the recent history does not permit it.
Thank you. Jeremy, I would like you to be happy. And you know, it means the world to me. But we have we are in a reality, right? So, Boris, what is your answer to Jeremy's question? He's 18 years old. He could have been your grandchild, right?
The first NPP was built in the US, in Chicago, in 1942. And its capacity was 200 kilowatts, I believe. And it produced plutonium. It worked on plutonium. In the USSR, the first NPP was built in 1954. Kurchatov built it in Obninsk. The industrial large plant, first one, with RBMK 1000 reactors, where it was built in 1984 in Leningrad. And design of those reactors only started in 1972. And when the disaster happened, only in the USSR, we already had 15 units, as mentioned, RBMK, and 27 water hydrogen reactors, as in Zaporizhia and PP. So I think about that. I had to, well, from the very first days of the disaster, we were in that shift village in Zelenimys, and we traveled with the director like 15 kilometers to reach the NPP. And he told me, he said, give me some radio in my car, because I come there at 8 and I need to report to Moscow what's going on in the NPP, so that the shift manager reported to me while I'm traveling. And you know, the military said no. Then we went to a collective farm. We took a radio, huge. It was a huge device. We had to put it in the trunk of the car. And when there was some precipitations or something, we could not hear anything. But now we see that everyone have their cell phones in their arms, right? So in their hands. So the progress is so significant. Also, in Chernobyl NPP, for the first time in the USSR, we launched an experimental workshop for radiation the silicon experimentation. So we experimented with silicon in order to somehow improve the conductivity. And the silicon was used further for chips, for night vision devices, for television, for now you have the silicon in your iPads, iPhones. So the technologies have developed so significantly, and all of that requires a lot of electricity. And of course, nuclear energy, that's our future.
Thank you, Boris. And Dennis, would you please send us the name of the book you refer to, so we can include it in our library? In general, please, all of you. We need everything in our library, so keep sending it to us. Boris, I see you want to say something else. Go ahead.
This is the book. This is, well, this is the book that I suggest. Nikolai Arpan, our research advisor, he was very knowledgeable person. This is Chernobyl, Revenge of Peaceful Atom. So he starts with Curie and he completes with the recent events. That's just, I mean, for physicians, for engineers who work at NPPs, that is definitely very like a must. Yeah, I agree with that.
I guess it's time to ask it's hard to say goodbye to this panel. We have captured our hearts and our minds and our commitment to the future and to the present. But you remember I said that the last thing I do is ask for your last words for this webinar. We will have you again, so it will not be the last words in general. So let's again start from the end. Dennis, what would you like to say as a last message to this webinar?
Thank you. What I could summarize, I guess that it's important. Well, there is this wish, and Foucault, the philosopher, wrote about that. He wrote about negative events, and you somehow want to turn a blind eye on negative events or developments. But that's wrong. We need to explore, to analyze that. It's important to do that. And we need to start with adequate fixation. This is what you're doing now. This is about testimonies, even emotional testimonies, but these are important, these witnesses. What the other speaker shared with us today, registering these materials and what was on the media, that's also about documenting. So this documents that's the foundation based on which we could work with lots of stuff, including that could be used to overcome the trauma. And this is my advice and recommendation there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. And Dr. Branovan?
All of us who studied Chernobyl, who took part or know a fair amount about it, remember that for every incidence of bureaucratic inertia and attempts to hide facts from the population, there are many more, hundreds more tales of human perseverance, of heroism. And we face a very challenging world these days, not just from the consequences of Chernobyl, but other incidences and risks. And I think having faith in human positivity, having faith in the human mind and the desire to do good should serve us well in this challenge.
You. But not least by any means, Boris, please.
І на завершення, пан Борис. Well, maybe it's not good to talk about myself only, but I, back in 1959, as a young specialist, was sent to Tomsk 7. This was the closed city of the Ministry of Middle Machine Building. And we, young specialists, were wondering why in the city they were repaving the roads by asphalt every year. But because there was the high level of radiation, there were 2 nuclear power plants, and polonium was produced there from the spent fuel. And I have been working in the radioactive contaminated zone, and I was working there for 30 years. Dr. Gale, when he came to Chernobyl accident, he said that you will be able to live for another 25 years. But I have lived for 40 years and 4 days after the accident. So it will be interesting for me to discuss my situation with the physicians. I know that small doses of irradiation might be even wholesome for the human health, but in any case, the chronic diseases are even more serious for the people. So this is my opinion.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. If I may add my humble opinion, in many ways, the psychosocial, as you see also from the discussion, the political, the communal, etc., aspects have been too silent to speak about until now, but we must add them as well. Let me add, in conclusion, in addition to receiving the recording of the webinar, you will receive a flyer for our upcoming May 12 webinar, May 12 at 12:30. It's our second NPT virtual side event webinar, which will be devoted to invisible exposures, the radium girls, and the origins of accountability for radiation protection. Please, all of you, join us for that webinar as well. Although very different beginning, it will convey to you via theater and via education the story of the radium girls whose job was to add radium to watches so the watches light up. And all those girls died. And of course, justice was silent. Professional systems were silent. Please, and what's also important for the future, for all of you to learn in terms of education, that D.W. Gregory wrote a play based on that incident, and that play has been shown at least 3,000 productions across the United States and elsewhere to students of high school and college. So please come to that as well. You will see a different layer, different human discussion, but of all of the danger of radiation and how we hide it rather than try to bring it out, learn, and perhaps, Jeremy, answer your question positively. We do have one more comment from Japan, which is very late at night, you know that. So thank you for this important and interesting webinar. This is from Katsumi. We are still working on the second and third generation of the atomic survivors in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I'm also working with victims in Fukushima. Your information is very helpful for us in Japan. This is from Katsumi Furichu. Please, Katsumi, I believe we have met. Let's stay in touch and continue our studies. So they're international. As I said, the inventory, our nuclear inventory to study this is in Japanese, in Ukrainian, it's in all languages. Please, let's continue the studying together and do our best to learn and to make the world a better place for Jeremy's generation, for your grandchildren, Boris, for your great-grandchildren, for all of them. I can't thank you enough. Thank you. And we will be in touch, please. Thank you.